to another episode of Brian's Black Bag. Happy holidays. Hopefully you're getting some much needed R&R. I know I am, but I found some time to sit down and make a new video. Alright, so this video is going to be talking about STEP and in particular first aid. So first aid is important in my mind because it is kind of all-encompassing, overarching outline for the content on step one. It's not too detailed. I mean, if you want to get below the kind of surface level stuff that's on first aid, there's supplementary resources out there, which is kind of beyond the scope of this video. But again, importantly, it covers everything at a surface level that you'll need to know for your step one exam. So it's really at the core of pretty much everyone's step prep. So I thought it was important to kind of share how I'm going about tackling this. And, before I really dove into it, last year I read it, the relevant sections for the courses I had taken, but nothing too crazy. And I looked to see what was out there because I was kind of intimidated by this. I don't have it with me, unfortunately, but I'm sure you've seen it before. It is thousands of pages. It's incredibly dense. On any given page, there can be as many as 50 discrete facts that you try to cram into your head. So it is a behemoth, to say the least. So I was intimidated. I didn't really know how to approach it. So I kind of looked on other medical school blogs, YouTube channels to see what kind of existed. And there were really two schools of thought to kind of broadly lump things. So the first school of thought was just memorize everything, no problem. And I'm like, yeah, I wish I had a photographic memory because then school would be that much easier. So that was kind of a ridiculous explanation. Reading it is so passive, and passive things are not high yield in terms of retention long term. So that seemed a little silly to me. And then the other school of thought was all about comprehension. So to just understand everything that underpins everything in first aid to the nth degree. And don't get me wrong, I totally advocate for understanding something over blindly memorizing it, but in the context of first aid, if you could really tie all of that together, then you should probably be one of the authors, and in which case you are probably going to blow step out of the water, and you'll be making your own video at some point on how you did that. A lot of it is not well elucidated either. So to really truly comprehend how everything relates together doesn't really seem realistic in my mind either. And even if you were going to go about it that approach, there's still a ridiculous amount of memorization that goes into it, like the genes that are implicated in certain genes, what freaking chromosome they're found on. There's just a lot you got to cram into your head. So I kind of was like, okay, this is garbage. I'm going to go about it in my own way. And I thought I would make a video sharing what I'm doing because I think it's working so far, and I think it's worth sharing. So when I sat down, I thought about how to basically commit this beast to memory long term. I kind of fell back on what I do for long-term retention anyways, and I'm a big advocate of Anki because in my mind it is truly the king of memorization. It is the most effective and efficient way to retain things long-term, and that's because of the algorithm that's built into it. So if you're not super familiar with Anki, I'll link a blog piece and a video in the description. You can go check those out and then come back to this video. But basically it is the king of long-term memorization. So I knew I wanted to use that because there are literally a million resources out there, and it's super easy to get bogged down in them. Companies are constantly trying to profit off of medical students because we're so far in the hole. We're like, oh, what's another couple $100 for this product or that product? So there's a lot out there, and regardless of how good that is, if you are to watch a given video or read something, say in September of your M2 year, what is the chance that that's going to be sticking around weeks, months later? Again, unless you have a photographic memory, it's gone, which is why I wanted to use Anki, because it continues to bring the material back and show it to you. And with that algorithm, you see more of your weaknesses and less of your strengths. So you can have the best tool in the world, but unless you are continually seeing it throughout M2 year, the reality is that information is going to evaporate, and then time come dedicated, you're going to have to cram it all in again. So I wanted something that would really maximize my retention long term, which Anki without a doubt does, and it's super efficient and effective. So you can manually choose what you're going to review content-wise at intervals. But again, with Anki, it creates those intervals for you. So I don't even have to think about that. I don't have to be like, okay, I'm going to look at biochem on this break and biochem on that break, and that'll be 2 months apart, and then I'm going to look at it 4 months after that. Like, I don't even have to worry about that. I wake up, I open up the program, it tells me what cards to do. I do them, I close it, rinse, repeat, blah, blah, blah. And then also worth mentioning, the deck that I'm using is the Bro deck. So if you're not familiar with this, I'll throw another link in the description. And I also have a video that I'll link as well where I walked a friend through how exactly to use this, because it's a massive deck, and so there's an efficient way based on the tags. You can pull the relevant cards out that you want and kind of slowly tackle it. So that's what I'm doing. So I started this last year, and so I did the relevant cards last year, which really wasn't much. It was just biochem and immunology. I did those over the summer, kept up with the reviews, and then throughout this year, I've been doing the cards per the organ block that we're in. So what have we done so far? We've done musculoskeletal, cardio, renal, pulmonary. So I'm just finishing up the pulmonary cards. But so I've done all those new cards. I've kept up with the reviews, and I'm super happy with the results, because along with class, I felt like it gave me a deeper, not necessarily deeper, but it really cemented what I needed to know for class, and then especially for boards, and it's kept that material fresh. So like our first unit was musculoskeletal, and I'm still studying that to some degree, so it doesn't feel like that information is just gone in one ear and out the other, and is gone and wasted, and come dedicated or come spring, I'm going to have to try and pile that back in. So super happy with the results. I would highly recommend it. It doesn't have to be, so I'm pretty aggressive with it. I mean, I'm doing all of my reviews, so I'm doing probably a couple hundred cards per day, and the time commitment is anywhere between an hour and 2 hours, but I know so many people who are spending that much time on other resources, so some people kind of balk at that when I tell them that I'm doing so many flashcards in a given day. But again, I feel like it's a highly efficient and effective way to maximize my long-term retention. I have absolutely no problem committing that time, and I'm super happy with the results so far. And then you don't have to be as aggressive as I am with it. I mean, you could just kind of hammer out a certain section per time period and let those reviews lapse or suspend those cards. I mean, it's really up to you how aggressive you want to be and how you want to tackle it. But I would advocate, even if you're not going to keep up with the reviews for a short amount of time, doing certain cards to really hammer those concepts into your mind, because again, I think it's going to be far more efficient, effective, especially long term, than any other kind of passive method that is out there. And then last, so I think I'm kind of done with my Anki soapbox, particularly my Bro deck soapbox. If you refuse to do any of that, I would highly encourage you to do questions of some form. So throughout M2 year, I've been doing, because our school kind of handcuffs us into paying for the Kaplan Q Bank, although I am happy with the results so far. I would really advocate that you do some questions, because at least my experience at my school is our course questions for our midterms and finals are not quite as tertiary. There's just not as much critical thinking involved as the Kaplan questions that I've seen. So they're just really at another level, and I'm not someone who, I wouldn't consider myself a strong standardized test taker by any means, but again, I feel like it's a learned skill, and I've definitely learned that skill, and so doing those questions has really helped me hone in my test taking skills, my critical thinking skills, and cement concepts, which is probably the most important thing, because it's one thing to memorize all the symptoms of a disease, but just to read a stem and not have any prompt as to know, okay, this is cystic fibrosis, this is Crohn's, whatever. To identify that is another skill and requires deeper knowledge in itself, and it really cements things. So, like, for instance, in class during pulmonary, we learned about the antitrypsin deficiency, and how it can affect the lungs, but also the liver. And I had a question stem the very next day that was that verbatim, and I'm not going to forget that now, because I remember that stem, I remember how that patient presented, and it really stuck. So if you were going to do one thing and one thing only, I would highly encourage you to do questions, but also give the bro deck a look. And, as always, don't be shy. Reach out if you have any questions, concerns, and until next time.